Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit givemysterious.fm.
Previously on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
In 1928, a dramatic exorcism took place in Erling, Iowa. The possessed woman has been called by a variety of names to protect her identity. One of them was Anna Ecklund. And in 2016, a movie called The Exorcism of Anna Ecklund was released. The movie was fictionalized, but in 1935, a real-life account of the exorcism was published. What the public didn't know was that there was also a secret report that was never released, and it revealed even more dramatic things than were contained in the public account. So, who was the real-life Anna Ecklund? What happened with the exorcism? And what does the secret report reveal? So, Jimmy, what's our next episode going to be about?
Well, next week we're going to continue looking at the Erling exorcisms and others that were performed on Emma. We'll be covering the astonishing things that are revealed about them in the Secret Manuscript. Like I said, it's going to get wild. And then we'll see what we can figure out about this series of exorcisms from the faith and reason perspectives. So you won't want to miss this one.
You're listening to episode 413 of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, where we look at mysteries from the twin perspectives of faith and reason. In this episode, we're telling you the secrets of the Erling exorcism. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today is Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to stick around to the end of the episode, as we'll have your feedback on our recent episode number 402 on Hitler's marriage and more weird questions. But first, in 1928, a dramatic exorcism took place in Erling, Iowa. The possessed woman had been called by a variety of names to protect her identity, and one of them was Anna Ecklund. Last week, we told you the story of the Erling exorcism as it was chronicled in a booklet called Begone Satan. But there was also an account in a secret manuscript that was kept private, and it reveals much, much more. So who was the real-life Anna Ecklund? What does the secret report reveal? And what should we make of this case? That's what we'll be talking about on this episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. So, Jimmy, what should listeners know before we look at today's mystery?
Well, as you mentioned, this is part 2 of a 2-part look at the Erling exorcism case. Last week, we revealed what the booklet Begone Satan had to say about the mystery, and today we're going to be looking at what the Secret Manuscript says, as well as looking at the case from the faith and reason perspectives. Of course, today's mystery involves an apparent case of exorcism and demonic possession, and that can be scary. It also involves some references to some sensitive topics that I'm going to be delicate about, so they should go over the heads of people who are too small to understand. But as always, I'm going to be seeking to be clinical rather than sensationalistically hyping the fear factor in this mystery. But still, today's episode may not be suitable for children of certain ages or for particularly sensitive adult listeners, so people should make prudent decisions for themselves and their families.
Then, to get started, can you give us a quick recap? Can you summarize the case of the Erling exorcism and what the public knew about it, as we covered last week?
Basically, the energumen or possessed person was a woman who had been born in 1882. Her real name has never been confirmed, and for privacy reasons, she's known by a variety of pseudonyms. To avoid confusion, I'm substituting either Emma or Emma Schmidt into the sources that we're quoting, so we'll have a consistent name and not constantly changing names as I quote from different sources. So be aware that if you check a different source, you may see a different name for her, but here we're using the name Emma Schmidt. When she was about 26 years old in 1908, she began to exhibit symptoms of possession, and she appears to have been exorcised between 1908 and 1912 by Father Theophilus Reisinger. By 1928, when she was 46, she was again showing signs of possession, and so Father Reisinger again conducted a series of exorcisms. To keep Emma away from public attention, these were performed in the very small farming community of Erling, Iowa. Father Reisinger arranged with the local pastor, Father Joseph Steiger, to conduct the exorcisms there, and they were performed in a convent of Franciscan sisters that was located right next to the parish there on the same piece of property. When the exorcisms began, it appeared that Emma was possessed by 4 main spirits. The first claimed to be Beelzebub, who also claimed to be a different spirit than Lucifer. She was also possessed by 3 human spirits. The first was Judas Iscariot. The second was Emma's own abusive father, Jacob or Jake. And the third was Jake's mistress, Mina. The latter 2 had apparently died and gone to hell, only to come back and possess Emma. In addition to these, there were a large number of lesser spirits possessing her. The exorcisms took place between August and December of 1928, and Emma was finally delivered from the spirits on December 22nd. In 1935, a booklet called Begone Satan was published about these events. It had been written by Father Karl Vogel, and it was based on the reminiscences of the parish pastor, Father Steiger.
At this point, we're going to begin focusing on the Secret Manuscript. So what can you tell us about it?
The Secret Manuscript was written in 1934, and it was also written by a priest, in this case, the Jesuit Father F.J. Bunza. And it was based on a document written in German by another eyewitness, Father Theophilus Reisinger, who, as we said, was the exorcist in the case. The document has a really long title, which is
The Erling Possession Case, an exposition of the exorcism of Mary, a demoniac, and certain marvelous revelations foretelling the near advent of Antichrist and the coming persecution of the Church in the years 1952 to 1955.
But I'll be referring to it as just the Secret Manuscript for short. And it was kept secret. It was reserved on a private need-to-know basis, but despite that status, I have copies, and it's quite clear that it was not intended for public circulation. The beginning of the manuscript states,
Nota bene, or note well. The following facts concerning the famous Erling case are culled from the German manuscript of the case written by Reverend Father Theophilus Reisinger, OM Cap. These are not to be published through the press or from the pulpit.
So it starts off with a warning not to publish this document through the press, and priests are not supposed to make it known by preaching about it from the pulpit. The manuscript is about 36 pages long, single-spaced, but that varies a bit for 2 reasons. First, the manuscript was typed more than once, and the different typescripts have slightly different formatting and lengths. And second, some of the manuscripts are missing a couple of pages. One version that I have has the name Theophilus Reisinger written in pencil at the top of it. I suspect that this copy may have been meant for Father Reisinger himself and may have actually been owned by him. It also has some typos that have been fixed in pencil, but it's missing pages 14 and 35. It looks like those pages were accidentally lost because I didn't see anything on those pages that would suggest they were deliberately suppressed for any reason. It looks like they were just misplaced. Fortunately, I have another copy of the manuscript, and it contains all the missing material, though its pagination is different. Some brief excerpts from the document are also found in the Penguin Book of Exorcisms by Joseph Laycock, and we'll have a link to that so you can get it for yourself. But I'm privileged to be able to work from the full manuscript, and I want to give special thanks to Professor Laycock for helping me obtain copies of it. He's an associate professor of religious studies at Texas State University. He was extremely helpful when I was gathering key research material, and he's written several books that are related to this subject, so we'll have links to them at the end of the episode.
What does the Secret Manuscript tell us that Begone Satan did not reveal?
Well, Begone Satan describes Emma's state after the 1928 exorcisms like this.
From that time on, the woman, always sincerely good, pious, and religious, frequently visited the Blessed Sacrament and assisted at Holy Mass. She received communion in a most edifying manner. That which was so terrible for her while she was under the torturing powers of Satan is now the peaceful joy of her heart and soul.
And that sounds like a happy ending, but Begone Satan also has a brief supplement at the very end that says this.
There were still later possessions, but of a milder nature.
So the 1928 exorcisms didn't permanently free her. And the Secret Manuscript reveals that Emma's possessions were much, much more extensive than Begone Satan would lead you to think. The Secret Manuscript states that after the 1928 exorcisms that we covered last episode,
Emma was free, but only for a very short time, perhaps a day or two, when by permission of God's holy, though mysterious providence, other evil spirits came to take possession of her body.
So she was free only for a day or two before the new possessions began. Begone Satan does mention that Emma had been previously possessed and exorcised in 1912, but the Secret Manuscript states,
Emma was quite free in 1912, and that for a long time. She was perfectly free again in Erling, December 1928, but only for a short time, since the possessions began again in 1929.
The previous passage we read from the Secret Manuscript also said that she was free for only a day or two, but here it says that the possessions began again the next year in 1929. Now, you'll recall from last episode that Emma was reportedly freed on December 22nd, and that's just 9 days before the new year. So it's possible that she was possessed again either in late December 1928 or early January 1929, and both the Secret Manuscript statements can be approximately harmonized. It's also possible that she began to be harassed again in late December after a day or two, but that full-blown possession didn't take hold until 1929. The possessions also lasted a great deal of time despite Father Theophilus' efforts to exorcise Emma. The Secret Manuscript states,
The new possessions which took place after June 18, 1912 have, except for a short interval, not found their end yet.
The Secret Manuscript was written in 1934, and Emma's possessions reportedly began in 1908. So the Secret Manuscript indicates that, except for a short interval, she had basically been continuously subject to possession for 26 years, and the various exorcisms she underwent did not bring lasting relief. The possessions also may have gone on for longer than 26 years. That's just what we can document from when the Secret Manuscript was written in 1934, but the possessions and exorcisms may have gone on after that date for who knows how long. All of this gives us a very different picture than the triumphant deliverance from the devil depicted in Begone Satan.
Were the possessions after 1928 in any way different from the earlier ones?
It seems that they were initially similar, but at some point they came to be supplemented by some new content. The Secret Manuscript states,
Till a certain day, the visions which Emma had during her possessions represented evil spirits. For years she saw those horrid figures. Suddenly a change came. On that day, and from that day on, other visitors appeared in her visions, in addition to and at the same time as the accustomed evil spirits. These newcomers looked different and acted differently. They engaged in the fiercest battle with the evil spirits, exhorted Emma to perseverance in her faith and confidence in Jesus, and gave her directions for the guidance of Father Theophilus in his exorcisms. They were good spirits, heavenly visitors.
So previously, during her possession, she had visions of evil spirits, but now, while she did still have visions of evil spirits during spells of possession, they were supplemented by visions of heavenly figures. She also began getting visions in another context.
From that day, Emma received also, but during Holy Mass, the most important and amazing revelations as answers and questions put by Father Theophilus through her. They were given especially in 1930 and concerned Antichrist and his time, including interpretations of obscure passages of Holy Scriptures, in particular the Apocalypse. In 1931, our Lord made the following declaration to Emma: All the revelations which I have made to you are to be given to my servant, your confessor, that he may prepare the world. Not only that he himself may know them, but that he may prepare the world. Yes, it is the will of my Father that he do that. It is true, the world will not believe him, especially for this reason, that fair and peaceful years will precede him, Antichrist. But that makes no difference. He must prepare the world.
So now Father Reisinger had been given a special mission by Jesus to prepare the world for the coming of the Antichrist. And the Secret Manuscript contains a whole series of revelations attributed to Jesus between 1930 and 1933. There would be good and peaceful years before the arrival of Antichrist, so people would tend not to believe Father Reisinger's warnings, but then bad times would come when the Antichrist did appear. We also learned more about the exorcisms that had been done in Erling back in 1928. They had been much more significant than we originally realized. In fact, they had been spoken of in the book of Revelation itself, which you'll hear referred to as the Apocalypse. Apocalypsis is the Greek word for Revelation, and so an old-fashioned way or an old-fashioned name for the book of Revelation is the Apocalypse. Here, Father Reisinger asks whether the Erling exorcisms are referred to in Revelation chapter 12, and the answer is given by St. Michael the Archangel.
Put by Father Theophilus through Emma. Was the struggle which took place in Erling, Iowa, the end described in Apocalypse 12? Answer. Given by St. Michael the Archangel through Emma. I fought for you. A great number of evil spirits have been beaten. Moreover, the struggle engaged in by Lucifer and his angels and Michael and his angels in Erling, Iowa, for the purpose of entering heaven is described in Apocalypse 12. Lucifer was beaten and cast upon the earth.
So St. Michael confirmed that the exorcisms in Erling were the spiritual battle that Revelation 12 refers to when it says,
Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven.
St. Michael also confirmed that the devil had been trying to get into heaven, and this is referred to elsewhere in the Secret Manuscript.
Lucifer's aim in these struggles, as St. Michael revealed on July 20th, 1930, was to enter heaven, his most ambitious aim. But all the efforts of the evil spirits were thwarted by the exorcisms of Father Theophilus. The battle is described in Apocalypse chapter 12.
Father Bunza also states that these battles continued through the exorcisms performed in later years. And as you'd imagine, any heavenly battle big enough to be referred to in the book of Revelation itself was likely to involve a large number of demons. This is something that was confirmed both by Jesus and St. Michael.
In the midst of the exorcism in 1930, Jesus appeared to Emma during Holy Mass and said, I rejoice, my daughter, that you persevere so bravely, and are the instrument by means of which great honor is done to me, and great help given to the Catholic Church. In this exorcism, 10 million devils have already been cast into hell. And toward the end of these exorcisms, St. Michael appeared to Emma after the Agnus Dei and said, Victory is obtained in the name of Jesus and his bitter passion. Just as billions and billions of devils were cast into the abyss in Erling, so also here.
So Jesus confirmed that in just a single exorcism, 10 million devils had been cast into hell, and St. Michael confirmed that billions and billions with a B of devils had been cast into hell back in Erling in 1928, and the same was true now. Jesus also revealed that in just 2.5 months in 1931, an extraordinary number of demons had been expelled. The Secret Manuscript states,
Mid-June to end of August 1931, expulsion from Emma of 123 million devils of revelation and persecution of the Church, revealed by Jesus.
So in just 2.5 months between mid-June and August, 123 million devils had been exorcised and expelled from Emma. And these weren't just any devils. They were specifically devils of revolution and persecution of the Church. So you can imagine what would have happened if they had not been sent back to hell and had been able to prosecute their mission on earth. For example, the Secret Manuscript describes some of what would have happened if they had not been exorcised. Here, the Virgin Mary refers to the 4 angels bound in the Euphrates River that are mentioned in Revelation 9, verses 14 and 15, who are released to kill a third of mankind. Well, the Virgin Mary said this.
On August 3, 1930, the Blessed Virgin appeared to Emma at the beginning of the Epistle and Mass and spoke to her as follows. I, as the Queen of Heaven and the Queen of all the angels and saints, rejoice and exult on the fact that innumerable spirits have been cast into the abyss, who were to help the 4 angels who were bound at the river Euphrates. For those angels would have done much harm to the church.
So the demons that were inside of Emma in August of 1930 would have helped the 4 angels from the Euphrates do harm to the church. The Pope also would have been harmed if these exorcisms had not been performed. The Secret Manuscript states,
The liberty of the Pope was made possible by the exorcisms in Erling.
And that's something that's discussed elsewhere. It mentions that when Jesus gave Father Reisinger his commission to prepare the world,
Jesus added, Our case in Erling is connected with the freedom of the Pope. This liberty of the Pope became possible because in that place those devils who blocked it were cast into hell. Remark. Father Theophilus relates that when the devils were forced to leave Emma and Erling, they kept shouting, Now the Pope is free, now the Pope is free.
So the Pope was only at liberty because they got the spirits out of Emma and cast them into hell. The Pope presumably would have been held prisoner somewhere if the Erling exorcisms hadn't been done, but they were, and so he was free, something that the spirits were shouting back in Erling. The ongoing exorcisms after that also had beneficial effects on earth.
In Germany, Italy, and Spain, Jesus himself made the following revelations. As a result of the expulsion of the spirits of revelations in 1931, revolution could not break out in Germany. The planned persecution of the church could not be begun in Italy, and also in Spain much good has been done.
So all the exorcisms that were being done on Emma were having a major impact on the events of world history in the late 1920s and early 1930s. So Emma was a truly pivotal figure.
All of this was building up to the reign of the Antichrist, who Father Reisinger was supposed to warn the world about. We heard last episode that the devils possessing Emma had said things about the Antichrist. Can you refresh our memory about what they said?
Sure. To focus just on what the demons said, Begone Satan reports them as declaring,
Satan is already abroad, and the Antichrist is already born in Palestine. But he is still young. He must first grow up incognito before his power can become known. On one occasion, when Father Theophilus insisted that the devil should depart and return to hell, the devil replied in a growling tone, How can you banish me to hell? I must be free to prepare the way for the Antichrist. And again he spoke out of the possessed woman, We know a lot. We read the signs of the times. This is the last century. When people will write the year 2000, the end will be at hand.
And we're still only in 2026, so even though the 20th century is over, which creates some doubt about the accuracy of this claim, it's only a difference of 26 years, and that could hypothetically be consistent with the general time frame indicated by the demons. However, the revelations that Jesus gave through Emma to Father Reisinger were much more specific. The Secret Manuscript states,
Reverend Father Theophilus had heard the evil spirit say more than once the Antichrist was born. He had besides learned from Judas the Apostle, whose spirit was in Emma, assert in December 1928 that he, Judas himself, would come as Antichrist. He thought this important information, which involved Emma's case, a sufficient reason to ask Christ for a confirmation. Our Lord not only deigned to give the desired information, but encouraged other questions, especially concerning Antichrist himself.
So the spirit of Judas Iscariot had said that he would come as Antichrist, and Father Reisinger asked Emma to ask Jesus if this were true. This led to a series of revelations about the Antichrist, and in 1930, Jesus said,
Judas will come as Antichrist. This Antichrist will begin in his 33rd year, namely in 1952, and will end in 1955.
So if the Antichrist needed to wait until his 33rd year to begin to reign, and that happened in 1952, then the Antichrist would have been born around 1919. Also, in 1930, Jesus clarified the way in which Judas would come as the Antichrist. He stated,
Antichrist, namely he who will appear as Antichrist, is a common being begotten and born in the natural way as every other man. But Judas will possess this man so that the deeds of this man are the deeds of Judas. And since this man is already born, he is already possessed by Judas. Yes, he was possessed from the moment of his conception. But this man possessed by Judas cannot yet do his work. He is too young yet. I will add here that it is not advisable to reveal the name of Antichrist at present. He must grow up in perfect obscurity. Later on his name will be revealed. And what has been known long since? He was born in Palestine. He will appear personally in Jerusalem, Austria, and Germany.
So the Antichrist will be a human man, but the spirit of Judas Iscariot will possess him from the moment of his conception. And if the Antichrist had been born in 1919, he would have been conceived around 1918, and Judas would have been possessing him since that time, while also possessing Emma in 1928. Now, a common theory about the Antichrist in some circles is that he would be of Jewish extraction and that his mother would be a nun. In 1932, Jesus confirmed that, saying,
The mother of Antichrist is a nun of Jewish extraction, who holds intercourse with the old serpent. His father is a bishop, not a Catholic, but a schismatic one. This body, generated by the bishop out of that nun, is the body of which Judas took possession. The pretense will be made that here an incarnation took place, but it will be a mere pretense. An incarnation was possible only for me.
A figure that's often associated with the Antichrist is what the book of Revelation refers to as the false prophet. Did Jesus say anything about this figure?
Yes, in 1930, Jesus reportedly said,
Lucifer is that false prophet. He will form for himself a body of matter that he may appear as a man among men.
Did the revelations that Jesus gave Emma connect with ideas that had been discussed by other reported visionaries?
Yes, and one of them was the famous 3 days of darkness that many people talk about. The 3 days of darkness do not appear in any private revelations that the church has approved, and I've written about them before, so we'll have a link to that article. But Jesus apparently told Emma that they are real. First, however, I'd observe that Father Bunza, who wrote the Secret Manuscript, noted,
Remark: some think of a darkness in the literal, others in the figurative sense of the word.
So here in 1934, we have a supporter of the 3 days of darkness, noting that they might not involve literal darkness, but something else. In any event, here is what Jesus said about the 3 days of darkness in 1932.
Question: are these days of darkness days of 24 hours? Answer: the 3 days of darkness at the time of Antichrist are days of 24 hours each. The darkness must not last longer. Otherwise, the good would die of fear and anxiety. Question: when will Antichrist and the false prophet be destroyed? Answer: Antichrist and the false prophet will be destroyed during the 3-day darkness and cast into hell.
So that tells us when the 3 days of darkness happen, at the end of the Antichrist's reign in 1955.
Do we know anything else about the events leading up to this?
Yes, a certain figure that has been popular in some Catholic circles that discuss prophecy is known as the Great Monarch. He's a strong European Catholic king who will reign in a just and holy way and cure a bunch of problems on the continent of Europe. He was discussed in a variety of private revelations during the age when there were strong monarchs in Europe, though none of those revelations has been approved by the Church. There is a possible reference to him in one of the secrets attached to Our Lady of La Salette, and we covered that apparition back in episode 60, so you can listen to that for more information about La Salette and the problems with it. However, Jesus revealed that the Great Monarch is real, and he even revealed who it would be. Jesus answered the following question in 1930.
Question: is Prince Otto the Great Monarch? Answer: Tell your confessor that Prince Otto of Habsburg will appear as the Great Monarch, just as he is described in Holy Scripture. Your confessor knows it already.
In 1930, Prince Otto von Habsburg was the 18-year-old head of the House of Habsburg-Lorraine. He had just reached legal adulthood, or at least as it's now understood. I'd have to check what the rules were where he was living. It might have been 21 or something. But in the view of many, he was the rightful heir to the thrones of Austria and Hungary, the Austrian Empire being the successor of the Holy Roman Empire that had reigned for 1,000 years until the early 1800s. So there was a good bit of popular speculation about him returning his family to the throne and being a great king. Wikipedia gives us some additional background.
With his father's accession in 1916, he was likely to become emperor and king. As his father never abdicated, Otto was considered by himself, his family, and Austro-Hungarian legitimists to be rightful emperor-king from his father's death in 1922. Otto was exiled in 1919 and grew up mostly in Spain. His devout Catholic mother raised him according to the old curriculum of Austria-Hungary, preparing him to become a Catholic monarch. Otto was active on the European political stage from the 1930s by promoting the cause of Habsburg restoration and as an early proponent of European integration. He was a fierce opponent of Nazism, nationalism, and communism. He has been described as one of the leaders of the Austrian resistance.
Also in 1930, Jesus answered this question about him.
Question. Is Otto of Habsburg the man who is called the Great Monarch, and can he ascend the throne of Hungary? Answer. Yes, Otto will be king, not because men want it, but through God's providence. He is the man who is mentioned in Holy Scripture. Tell this to my servant, your confessor. He knows whom I refer to.
And in 1931, Jesus was asked if Otto would become king at that particular time.
Question. Will Otto become king in this present confusion of things? Answer. Otto of Habsburg, son of Emperor Karl, will reign at the time of Antichrist, and his achievements will be wonderful.
So you shouldn't expect Otto to become king at the moment in 1931, but by the time of the Antichrist, between 1952 and 1955, he will be the Great Monarch. There had also been speculation about another member of the Habsburg family. That was Otto's granduncle by representation, Franz Ferdinand. He had been the heir presumptive to the Austro-Hungarian throne, but he was assassinated in 1914, which was the key event that led to World War I breaking out. And we'll talk about that in a future episode. So Franz Ferdinand was a very pivotal guy in history, and Jesus revealed that
Francis Ferdinand of Austria had been destined to become the Great Monarch, but on account of the postponement of the time he died as a saint without having been able to do what he had been appointed for.
However, there would be no more postponement, as Father Bunza writes.
Since Antichrist has already been born, the time of the Great Monarch cannot be postponed anymore.
And so the timetable for Antichrist appearing in the mid-20th century was now locked in.
So Otto von Habsburg will become the Great Monarch, the Antichrist will reign between 1952 and 1955, and then his reign will be destroyed in the 3 days of darkness. Do we know anything else about how these events will play out?
Well, one thing that we know is that all people living in 1955 will see miraculous signs in the heavens. In 1932, Jesus said,
Question. Put by Father Theophilus through Emma. Shall all men living in 1955 see Christ and his cross appearing in the sky? Answer. Yes.
So Jesus confirmed that in 1955, all men would see him and his cross appearing in the sky. And it appears that Father Reisinger connected this with the event described in Revelation 19, verses 11 to 21, where John sees a vision of Jesus riding a white horse in heaven. And then the beast and the false prophet and their army are killed and thrown into the lake of fire. Father Reisinger had Emma ask if this was about the struggle between Christ and the Antichrist or about the end of the world.
Question. Does Apocalypse 19:11-21 refer to the struggle of Christ with Antichrist or the end of the world? Answer: Apocalypse 19:11-21 refers to the struggle of Christ with Antichrist and not to the end of the world. The reason for the fact that many theologians and exegetes refer those words to the end of the world is this: that they read them too superficially. The explanation of these words, given by your confessor, is correct.
So in 1955, people will see Christ and his cross in heaven. Christ will possibly be seen riding a white horse, and the events in Revelation 19, verses 11-21 will be fulfilled so that the Antichrist will be defeated. Father Reisinger also had a unique insight into something that Christians have been confessing for the last 1,700 years, and this revelation came from 1932 in an unusual way because it originally appeared as a revelation to Father Reisinger directly, not through Emma initially, but to Father Reisinger, and he then had Emma confirm it with Jesus. The Secret Manuscript explains,
This revelation was not, as the other ones, given through Emma, but was communicated to Father Theophilus directly as a prophetic inspiration, and on the day following the inspiration, acknowledged by Jesus as a true revelation. Father Theophilus says, I was in the church saying my office, when suddenly a thought struck me which I had never had before. Besides, this thought seemed to me an inspiration made by Jesus himself. I felt as if someone spoke to me silently, yet with the highest degree of perceptibility, as follows. Write these thoughts, and have me then asked. I was unable to resist this order, and wrote these thoughts.
So here is the inspiration that Father Reisinger wrote down, and it has to do with a particular line in the Nicene Creed. The line in question is, From thence he, meaning Jesus, shall come to judge the living and the dead. Now, historically, this line has always been understood as referring to how Jesus will judge everybody. The living are those who happen to be alive at the time of the second coming, and the dead are all the people who died before the second coming. So between judging the living and judging the dead, Jesus will return to judge everyone. But in a sudden inspiration, a different interpretation that nobody in church history had thought of struck Father Reisinger. Here's what he wrote.
My dear Jesus, we pray in the Nicene Creed, from thence he shall come to judge the living and the dead. Lord Jesus, I understand this article of faith as follows. The help of Antichrist consists of still living men and of damned souls in his army, who appear among men with apparent bodies in order to help in the fight against the church and you. O Jesus, enlightened by your light, I understand these two divisions to be the living and the dead. When you, O Jesus, come to overthrow Antichrist with his entire help, you will come with great power and splendor, just as the apostles and disciples say you ascend into heaven. You will be accompanied by all angels and saints. This is the moment of which you have said, when you see this coming, lift up your hearts and rejoice, for your redemption is near. Luke 21:28. You, dear Jesus, will come as judge of the living and the dead. That is, you will lay low the living who help Antichrist, and also the damned dead whom Lucifer sent to assist him, who are present with apparent bodies. You will cast them into hell with Antichrist and Lucifer. This is the judgment over the living and the dead.
So here, the living are not everyone alive at the second coming, but only those who are alive and helping the Antichrist. And the dead are not all people who died before the second coming, but only the souls of dead men who are helping the Antichrist using apparent but not real bodies. These two groups are what the line in the Nicene Creed refers to. There was also more to this inspiration that Father Reisinger wrote down, but we don't know what it is, as we're about to see. Father Reisinger continued,
I consider this judgment of the living and deceased men helping the Antichrist as the beginning of the judgment, namely the beginning of the universal judgment. After this first act of the universal judgment, remark, At the express command of our Lord, only a part of the inspiration or revelation may be communicated.
So, according to Father Bunza, our Lord himself commanded that the remainder of Father Reisinger's revelation was not allowed to be communicated in the secret manuscript, and so the rest of it was not included.
Father Reisinger had been told to have Emma check this out with Jesus and make sure it was a genuine inspiration from God. What happened when they did that?
Well, here is the question they posed and the answer that Jesus gave.
Question. Was what I have written about the judgment of the living and the dead correct? Answer. The following day Jesus appeared at Holy Mass, bleeding from all wounds. He then approached Emma in the figure of the Sacred Heart and said, "All that your confessor has written down yesterday is completely correct. At that time there will be only one faith, one shepherd, and the flock. Now everything that I intended to reveal has been revealed."
So Jesus confirmed that he will return in 1955 to judge the living and the dead, by which is meant the living men helping the Antichrist and the dead men whose souls have been sent in assumed bodies to help the Antichrist. And that's what the Nicene Creed refers to.
But wait, if Jesus returns in 1955 for this judgment of the living and the dead, what about the rest of humanity? Do they get judged at this time, or will Christ come yet another time after this?
Father Bunza interacts with this issue and writes,
Another obvious objection. According to the teaching of the Church, Christ will come only once more, but according to the new revelation, he will come in 1955 for the first, and at the end of the world for the second and last act of the universal judgment. Does that not mean, according to the new revelation, he will come a second and a third time? In answer to this objection, we deny the logical sequence of the deduction, but instead of pointing out the error, we prefer to leave it to the logical thinking of the reader or hearer to find it. We do so because the really logical conclusion is identical with the special revelation made on this point, which Father Theophilus has been forbidden by Christ to communicate at present.
So Father Bunza says that there is an answer to this question, and you may be able to figure it out, but he can't tell us what it is because it's found in the rest of the material from Father Reisinger's inspiration that they're not allowed to disclose. I can think of ways to harmonize these points, but I don't know what Father Reisinger and Father Bunza were thinking specifically, so I won't speculate on that here.
Okay, then what happens after this?
Well, it had already been revealed that everyone in 1955 will see Christ and his cross in the heavens, so as you would imagine, there would be a massive wave of conversions. And among its effects, it looks like the Christian world will be put back together, because you'll recall that Jesus had confirmed that at that time there will be only one faith, one shepherd, and the flock. And that's something they asked about on another occasion.
Question. Will, after the fall of Antichrist, that time come when there will be only one fold and one shepherd? Answer. Yes. After the fall of Antichrist, that time will come when there will be only one fold and one shepherd.
There will also be a resurrection of the dead. This is something Father Reisinger got to wondering about. Revelation 20, verses 4 and 5 contains a statement that can be translated in more than one way. In some translations, it says that the martyrs in heaven lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years, while in other translations, it says they came to life and reigned 1,000 years. I won't go into the details here, but we discussed the major interpretive theories of Revelation back in episode 408, so you can check that out. Advocates of the school of thought known as futurism often hold that Revelation 20 refers to a partial resurrection of the dead, followed by a period of at least 1,000 years, after which Satan must be released for a short time before we get to the final end and the general resurrection. Well, since Father Reisinger had been told that the reign of the Antichrist would end in 1955, with some kind of coming of Jesus occurring then, he wondered if Revelation 20, verses 4 and 5, could refer to an actual bodily resurrection of the righteous. So he asked,
Question put by Father Theophilus. Dear Jesus, What is the interpretation of Apocalypse 20, 4-5, where we read, "And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the testimony of Jesus and for the word of God, and who had not adored the beasts, nor his image, nor received his character on their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. The rest of the dead lived not till the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection." Is here a real resurrection meant so that the bodies will rise up out of their dust, and that immediately after Satan has been bound and shut up in hell? Will this resurrection take place right after the overthrow of Antichrist, and therefore long before the general judgment resurrection? Are these holy martyrs really constituted in blood and soul to reign during that time when there will only be one fold and one shepherd, before the time when Satan shall be loosed again? Answer: yes, certainly it is correct.
So Jesus confirmed that after the Antichrist is defeated, there is a massive wave of conversion so that there is one flock and one shepherd, that the souls of the martyrs will be bodily resurrected and reign for a long time before Satan is released again, and we get to the general resurrection and judgment. Apparently, Father Reisinger was able to learn some more about what would happen after 1955, but the Secret Manuscript states,
"Some revelations regarding the time after 1955 may not be communicated."
So we don't know about those, and that's most of what we need to cover from the Secret Manuscript. Now it's time for us to go into analysis mode and look at the Ecklund Exorcism case and the ones that followed from the perspectives of faith and reason.
And before we do that, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make this show possible, including Jesse J., Thomas M., Lindsay S., Malachi C., and Sam W. Their generous donations at givemysterious.fm make it possible for us to continue Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World and all the shows at StarQuest. More than 90% of our financial support comes from individual donors like you, and you can join them by visiting givemysterious.fm. Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World is also brought to you in part by the Grady Group, a Catholic company bringing financial clarity to their clients across the United States, using safe money options to produce reasonable rates of return for their clients. Learn more at GradyGroupInc.com. So, Jimmy, what theories are there about the Ecklund exorcisms and the ones that followed?
Well, the theories would fall into two categories, naturalistic or normal theories and preternatural or paranormal theories. When it comes to naturalistic theories, we always have to consider the question of hoax. Could this all have been made up? We also have to ask whether it could be due to imagination or mental illness or things like that. When it comes to preternatural or paranormal theories, it would seem that there are two basic ones we should consider. First, there's the interpretation that Father Reisinger and Father Bunza held, and it's that their theory was correct, that Emma was possessed by demons and then got heavenly visitors, and Jesus really did confirm all the things that are attributed to him. The second view would be that Father Reisinger and Father Bunza were mistaken, that Emma was possessed by demons, but then they impersonated the heavenly visitors, and we should not regard Jesus as saying all the things attributed to him. There are also combination theories that are possible, like maybe demons plus mental illness, but this is a general sketch of the framework we need to look at.
Then let's look at this case from the reason perspective. Since the mystery involves elements related to the faith, what will we cover here?
Basically, we'll start by looking at the normal or naturalistic theories that can be handled from the reason perspective. Then we'll look at the paranormal or preternatural theories from the faith perspective.
Okay, let's start with the hoax theory. What do you make of it?
Well, the first question would be, okay, who was performing the hoax? The two people at the center of the case are Emma herself and Father Reisinger. But I don't think that we could say it was just a hoax on Father Reisinger's part, because we have other witnesses to the 1928 Ecklund exorcisms. In particular, we have Father Reisinger's friend, Pastor Joseph Stein, who provided the material in Begone Satan. He testifies that he saw Emma and that he saw her being exorcised over a period of months in 1928. Begone Satan also has a statement from Father Steiger's housekeeper. It says,
Testimony of Teresa Wegerer, Father Steiger's housekeeper. I was a witness to almost the whole period of the exorcism of the Erling possession case, and I can truthfully say that the facts mentioned in Begone Satan are correct. Some of the scenes were even more frightful than described in the booklet. There is not the singlest doubt in my mind that the devils were present, and I will never forget the horrible scenes, vile, filthy, and dirty, as long as I live. All the nuns asked for a change and were transferred the next year. The woman came back to Erling, over a distance of 1,000 miles, 4 months after the exorcism, to make a novena of Thanksgiving. This was at the bidding of Christ himself. During her stay, she boarded with the Chmielewski family. She told me how our Blessed Lord appears to her frequently and encourages her to be faithful.
So we have independent witnesses in the form of Father Steiger, his housekeeper, and apparently the Franciscan nuns and the Chmielewski family. It thus sounds like Emma was a real person, and there really were exorcisms performed on her in Erling. So Father Reisinger couldn't have just made everything up.
What if Emma herself was in on the hoax? What if the two of them came to Erling and then he pretended to exorcise her?
This is hypothetically possible, but I don't think it's probable. One reason is that you need a motive for a hoax, and Emma and Father Reisinger don't seem to have benefited from this. The Secret Manuscript was never published, and Begone Satan wasn't published until 1935. That's 7 years after the exorcisms. Hoaxers aren't normally content to pull a hoax and then wait 7 years for someone else to publicize it, because Begone Satan was written by Father Karl Vogel based on the memories of Father Steiger. So neither Emma nor Father Reisinger were connected with its publication, and they wouldn't have made any money on it. Father Reisinger might have gotten some attention after the booklet came out, but it likely wasn't welcome attention. A biography of Father Reisinger, written in 1942 after his death, states that shortly after his ordination, when he was a priest in New York City,
it was at this time also that, according to his statement, circumstances forced him to take up his peculiar work against evil spirits. In 1912, this effort brought him into conflict with diocesan authorities. He was transferred to Wisconsin and for the next 30 years alternated between Appleton and Marathon.
And according to the Secret Manuscript, which was written before Begone Satan was published, his reputation was not very good in ecclesiastical circles. It states,
the evil spirits who threatened Father Theophilus to take vengeance on him for his persistent and successful work against hell by ruining his character, especially among his fellow religious, have succeeded to a large extent.
So it doesn't look like Father Reisinger tried to get famous based on this incident, and that what attention he did receive in connection with his exorcism work was negative. It's also certainly true that Emma did not seek to gain publicity. In fact, her identity was hidden so well that we still aren't sure what her real name was. So with Emma and Father Reisinger not being involved with the booklet that came out 7 years after the events, not otherwise publishing anything about it, not making any money off it, and not wanting fame, it doesn't look like they had a partnership in hoaxing this.
What about the idea that Emma herself was a lone hoaxer? What if she faked the possessions in order to get attention, not from the public, but from Father Reisinger?
This would be the most plausible of the hoax theories, but there is a problem, which is that, according to both Begone Satan and the Secret Manuscript, the exorcisms of 1928 were long and excruciating. They went on for weeks. She was confined to a bed when an exorcism session was happening, and she would have had to scream and yell and make barking and other animal noises and imitate a whole bunch of different voices, and that puts this beyond the realm of a simple hoax. Anyone who would be willing to do all that stuff in order to get the attention of a priest would be mentally ill.
Okay, then let's look at the mental illness explanation. If Emma was mentally ill and this produced her symptoms, what could the illness have been?
Well, there are a whole bunch of medical conditions that could be misdiagnosed as demonic possession. These include things like dissociative identity disorder, schizophrenia, epilepsy, manic episodes, and psychosis. But I'd like to call attention to two conditions. The first is formally known as factitious disorder imposed on self. The word factitious means invented or not true. So a factitious disorder is a disorder that has been invented and isn't real. Imposed on self means exactly what it sounds like. So in a case of factitious disorder imposed on self, a person invents a disorder and then imposes it on themselves. In other words, they pretend to have it when they actually don't. This disorder is popularly known as Munchausen syndrome, after the fictional character Baron Munchausen, who was known for embellishing the stories he told. Basically, people with this condition fake having another condition in order to get attention. But it is an actual mental illness, so people can go to extreme lengths to get the attention that they crave. And I would note some of the predisposing factors for this condition are abuse, neglect, trauma, and family dysfunction. And that sounds very much like the family situation Emma was reportedly raised in, with Emma's abusive father, Jake, who reportedly tried to force himself on her, with Jake's mistress, Mina, who reportedly also tormented Emma, and with Emma's mistreated mother, whose husband had turned to Mina instead of her. So I think that factitious disorder imposed on self should be considered as a possibility if we were trying to diagnose a specific mental illness. However, factitious disorder imposed on self is not the only possibility here. It's also possible that Emma could have had delusional disorder and sincerely believed that she was demonically possessed. There are also other conditions she could have had that were responsible for the voices she heard and the visions that she said she saw.
You said there was a second condition that you wanted to call attention to. What was that?
It's known as folie à deux, which is French for madness has two. It's more formally known as shared psychotic disorder or induced delusional disorder. In folie à deux, a delusion starts with one person, and then that delusion comes to be shared by another person, someone that they are emotionally close to. Now, Father Reisinger had apparently met Emma in 1908, and he was active in helping her, either in person or through the mail, from then until at least 1934, when the Secret Manuscript was written. That's a period of at least 26 years. She presented symptoms of possession almost the entire time, with only brief respites, and he was her primary spiritual caretaker that she turned to for help with these possessions. He periodically performed long, exhausting, difficult sequences of exorcisms on her, punctuated with periodic moments of thankful deliverance and relief. Over a period of 26 years, you can see how an emotional bond would build up between the two, with both Emma and Father Reisinger regarding him as at least her earthly savior. He's the only man who really understood her and could really help her, especially given the small number of exorcists at the time. Well, if Emma was pretending to be demonically possessed, as on factitious disorder imposed on self, or if she sincerely but mistakenly believed herself to be demonically possessed, as on delusional disorder or a similar one, then you can see how this belief could be transferred to Father Reisinger and how it could grow stronger over time. Also, shared delusions are commonly persecutory in nature, like we heard about in episodes 162 and 163 about Pauline Dakin's secret childhood and the weird world, which involved a case of folie à deux with a delusion about being persecuted by the mafia. Well, here, Emma was claiming to be persecuted by countless demons and evil human souls. So I think that folie à deux or something similar should also be considered if we were trying to diagnose a specific mental illness. However, I'm not a psychologist, and we can't interview Emma and Father Reisinger anyway, which is essential to having an accurate diagnosis. So I won't be trying to diagnose any specific mental illness in this episode. I only raise these as possibilities under the mental health explanation for the case.
It sounds like you think that the hoax theory alone isn't sufficient to explain the situation, and that if a hoax was involved on Emma's part, it needs to be coupled with a mental health explanation. Or it might not have involved hoaxing at all and was just a mental health situation. So let's look at the overall mental illness scenario. How would you argue both for and against it?
If I were to argue in favor of this case being due to mental illness, I would point to a few things, because there are multiple things in this case that are consistent with mental illness. I'm not saying that you can't read them in another way that's consistent with possession, but they would be consistent with or even suggestive of mental illness. Let me initially point out that when exorcisms fail to work over a long period of time, I view it as a red flag. Now, it's possible that a person who has been demonically possessed will become possessed again. In Luke 11, Jesus says,
"When the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless places seeking rest. And finding none, it says, 'I will return to my house from which I came.' And when it comes, it finds the house swept and put in order. Then it goes and brings 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and dwell there. And the last state of that person is worse than the first."
The standard interpretation of this passage is that the evil spirit may return with others unless the person has responded correctly to the message of Jesus and his gospel. It's not enough to sweep the house and set it in order. You need to embrace Jesus and let yourself be filled with the Holy Spirit, and that will keep demons away from you. So you wouldn't expect a person like Emma, who was leading a faithful Christian life after her exorcisms, to immediately become possessed again, like in a day or two. I thus view swift repossessions as a red flag. The longer exorcisms fail to work, the more likely it is that the actual situation was due to mental illness.
Okay, then bearing that in mind, what specific factors would you point to that are consistent with this case being due to a mental illness of some kind?
Well, first, Emma apparently came from an abusive background, including her father reportedly trying to force himself on her, and abuse, especially that kind of abuse, is a predisposing factor for serious mental illness. Second, Emma's spiritual crisis in 1908, when she was 26, reportedly occurred after she got an operation. And as we heard last episode, that operation may have been an illegal abortion. She did later claim to have preserved her virginity, despite the advances of her father and a possible lover named John, but there's no way to verify that she had preserved her virginity. And an abortion would be inconsistent with her Catholic faith and could prompt a spiritual crisis. She might believe that demons had led her to get pregnant and to have the abortion, and that she deserved to be persecuted by them. Third, she was then exorcised in 1908 by Father Reisinger, who was 40 years old at the time. So here, an older man and a rather masculine and spiritual man was taking an interest in her. He's like the care and father figure that she never had in her biological family, and he's trying to bring her comfort from the torment she's experiencing. The exorcisms then go on for 4 years, which is a very long time. And then she's finally freed in 1912. But that's when he gets in trouble with the church authorities and gets transferred to Wisconsin, so she can't see him anymore. Fourth, the deliverance she's experienced doesn't stick. She apparently has another exorcism by Father Reisinger in 1926, and by 1928, she's writing him letters telling him about the demons that are now oppressing her. He arranges to have her exorcised in Erling, Iowa, and they're reunited again. And then between August and December of 1928, they have 3 lengthy series of exorcisms, which are wrenching and exhausting experiences for both of them. She's possessed by 2 icons of evil, Beelzebub and Judas Iscariot. She goes into all the material about her abusive father and his mistress, because they're also both possessing her and trying to drag her to hell. And there are countless other spirits besides the big four that come into her, such that whenever Father Reisinger gets rid of one batch, a new batch comes in, which was noted even at the time as being very unusual in a case like this. And then on December 22nd, there's another joyful and tearful moment of deliverance. Only fifth, it doesn't last. This time, the deliverance only lasts a few days, and the possessions resume either in late December of 1928 or in early January of 1929. So that brings her and Father Reisinger back together again. And sixth, none of the new exorcisms are effective for more than very short periods. Emma is effectively possessed almost continuously through at least 1934, so she and Father Reisinger are continuously in touch. Seventh, it turns out that her exorcisms are incredibly important, beginning a pattern that could be described in mental illness terms as delusions of grandeur. All the demons being cast out of Emma would have gone on to cause wars and revolutions and persecutions of the church if they hadn't been exorcised and sent back to hell. Who knows how many people would have died? And the fact the Pope himself is walking around as a free man is due to what Emma and Father Reisinger are doing. They are the saviors of the Pope. Eighth, it turns out that the exorcisms they are doing are wrapped up in events described in the Bible, in the book of Revelation. So Emma is a pivotal figure whose struggles are mentioned in the Bible itself. That's also consistent with delusions of grandeur. Ninth, Emma starts having contact with figures like Jesus, the Virgin Mary, and St. Michael the Archangel, and Jesus himself gives Father Reisinger a mission that he must fulfill to warn the world about the Antichrist. So that could be a delusion of grandeur regarding him. 10th, the arrival of the Antichrist is imminent. It's scheduled to happen between 1952 and 1955. That's a date near enough to generate urgency for Father Reisinger's mission, but far enough away that he probably won't be around to see it, since he was born in 1868, and if he had lived to be 72 years old, he would be expected to die in 1940, and he did in fact die in 1941. The Secret Manuscript even shows awareness that Father Reisinger was unlikely to live that long. After discussing how Judas will return as the Antichrist, it says,
"An additional revelation made by Jesus on that day through Emma concerns Father Theophilus. Your confessor will not live anymore unless I prolong his life, and I will prolong it if it will become necessary. Besides, your confessor is preparing the people even now."
So that makes it sound like he would not be likely to live to see these prophecies disconfirmed. And 11th, they were disconfirmed because the Antichrist did not reign between 1952 and 1955. Otto von Habsburg did not become the Great Monarch. In fact, he never became a king at all, and he died in 2011. Jesus Christ did not return in 1955. People did not see him and his cross in the sky. The 3 days of darkness did not happen. There was not a massive wave of conversions leading to a one shepherd, one flock situation. There was not a partial resurrection of the martyrs, and they did not begin reigning for 1,000 years. So all of these prophetic announcements were falsified. And they couldn't just be delayed, since the Antichrist had already been conceived, already been possessed by Judas, already been born, and was already growing up. So there was now a ticking clock created by the lifetime of the Antichrist. 12th, Father Reisinger began to become a participant in the prophetic revelations, like his insight that the line in the Nicene Creed about Christ judging the living and the dead actually referred to Christ judging the living and dead supporters of the Antichrist, instead of the obvious meaning it had through all of church history as a statement that Christ will judge all humans. A second person coming to share in the revelations would be consistent with Folie à Dieu. And then 13th, Jesus confirmed all of Father Reisinger's interpretations. He began using Emma as a channel to ask Jesus about his interpretations of the book of Revelation. And judging by the Secret Manuscript, what do you know? Jesus confirmed every single idea that Father Reisinger proposed. He seems to have never been wrong even once, consistent with the idea that Jesus wasn't really confirming these ideas, and Emma was consciously or unconsciously manufacturing these responses to keep Father Reisinger involved in and believe in these revelations that would later be falsified. Taking all this into account, I think there is a very significant case that can be made that the situation was due to mental illness.
Now that you've made the case for mental illness, how would you argue against it being due to mental illness?
Well, in any case like this, you need to look for evidence that anything preternatural or paranormal was happening. Paranormal events are less common than normal events by definition, so the argument that this wasn't due to normal events like mental illness would depend on the evidence that we have that points in the other direction, that would take the form of reported preternatural events that occurred in connection with the case.
Then what claims of preternatural events are there?
Well, there are a number of them. Most of them we heard about last week. They include Emma had unconscious awareness of things. She spoke foreign languages she didn't know. She detected blessed food. She detected a cross relic that was hidden. It was a relic of the true cross. She detected a relic of the little flower. She detected and allegedly caused Father Steiger's car accident. She spoke without her mouth moving. She vomited an extraordinary amount, and she reportedly levitated. However, we have to be careful here, especially with the claims in Begone Satan, because they are secondhand accounts based on what Father Vogel was told orally by Father Steiger. So there may be inaccuracies and exaggerations in the transmission of these memories. We're on a better footing with the Secret Manuscript because much of it consists of extracts from an unpublished German manuscript that Father Reisinger wrote, and Father Bunza only occasionally introduces comments of his own. Even this could be considered secondhand, and it can also contain inaccuracies since Father Reisinger apparently didn't have a transcriptionist there taking down dictation during the exorcisms, so it's also based on his after-the-fact memories, but at least it's closer to eyewitness material. With both manuscripts, though, we can't just assume that every detail of them is accurate, so while not rejecting what they say, we also have to apply healthy caution to the claims and be alert for possible exaggerations and inaccuracies.
Then let's go through these one by one and see if they can be explained in normal terms or if they must be understood as preternatural or paranormal in nature. What is the claim about her having unconscious awareness of things?
The claim is that Emma was completely unconscious during the exorcisms, and she had no memory of what happened during them. But then, after the exorcism, she'd wake up and say things like, "Father Reisinger, St. Michael told me that you should stick to the words of the exorcism text instead of making up your own prayers." And Father Reisinger had, reportedly due to exhaustion, failed to stick closely to the official text and had made up some of his own prayers. But since Emma had been unconscious, she couldn't have naturally known that. So it must have been a paranormal source like St. Michael that told her about the situation. At least that's the argument.
What do you make of it?
I don't think that we can have confidence that this was the case. The argument depends on Emma really being unconscious during these exorcisms. But if she had factitious disorder imposed on self, she would have been pretending to be asleep or otherwise possessed and out of it, and would have known full well what Father Reisinger was saying. So this would have a mental health rather than a paranormal explanation. And if she had a delusional disorder and been in a dissociative state, Father Reisinger still varied from the texts in her presence, and that information was registered by her physical senses. And if she then blocked out memories of what had happened during the exorcism, that information was still in her subconscious, and it could come to the surface in the form of a delusion about St. Michael telling her this. So whether she's pretending or not, I think the unconscious knowledge argument can have a mental illness rather than a paranormal explanation.
Then what about the claim that she displayed Xenoglossy, or new languages she hadn't studied? That's a classic form of preternatural knowledge that's used in diagnosing possession.
It is, but we have a problem here, which is that Emma was multilingual. First, though, we need to identify what languages she allegedly spoke while possessed. Begone Satan only mentions 3, English, German, and Latin. The Secret Manuscript, though, states,
besides her German and English, which she had acquired in early childhood, she understood Latin and Hebrew, the Italian, Polish, and other Slavonic languages which she had not learned.
Now, Emma spoke English fluently, which she would have used all the time here in America. She also spoke German fluently. Apparently, her parents were both born in Germany, and she likely grew up in a German-speaking immigrant community. She was also a devout Catholic in an age when Latin was used in the Mass and other Catholic prayers, and Latin was commonly taught in schools, so she had exposure to Latin. Where things get interesting are the claims that she understood Hebrew, Italian, Polish, and other Slavonic languages. Unfortunately, nothing more is said about this, so we have no idea what was actually happening with these languages. I mean, did Emma just seem to understand them? I mean, did someone say something to her in one of them and then she nodded or otherwise appeared to understand what was said? Or did she respond in the language, giving lengthy, multiple sentence spontaneous utterances in it in a way that made it clear that she both understood and had an active knowledge of how to speak the language? Well, we just don't know because we're not told. The Secret Manuscript doesn't indicate how much she really understood these languages. It just said she did in some way. I also find it unlikely that Father Reisinger knew all these languages himself. We do know that in addition to German, English, and Latin, he also spoke some Italian. So he may be dependent on what other people reported to him about instances where someone spoke to Emma in Polish or other Slavonic languages. The fact that Begone Satan only mentions English, German, and Latin could suggest that only little small snatches of other languages were ever spoken to her, and that means that she may have only been exposed to small bits of these other languages. And we don't know where in the German-speaking world Emma's parents were from or which specific languages were used in her immigrant community, because there were a lot of multilingual communities in Eastern Europe and among American immigrants, with German, Italian, Polish, and other Slavonic languages all being spoken in the same community. So Emma may have had exposure to these languages that way. And if she did have factitious disorder imposed on self, then she had 26 years to study foreign languages in order to impress Father Reisinger. So I don't think we can say with confidence that anything definitely paranormal happened here.
Then what about the various things she reportedly detected, like the blessed food, the relic of the true cross, the relic of the little flower, and Father Steiger's car accident?
I don't think that the detection of the blessed food can be confidently said to be preternatural. As we heard last week, one of the Franciscan sisters had sprinkled holy water over the food that Emma was being served on the night she arrived before the exorcisms began. Emma then threw a fit, and they sent back to the kitchen for more unblessed food. But Begone Satan doesn't say that she verbally identified the food as having been sprinkled with holy water. It doesn't report her saying, take this blessed food away. I'm not going to consume holy water. Instead, it just says that they brought some food to her. She became enraged. She made noises that sounded like a cat purring, and they couldn't make her eat it. Okay, so they brought some food to her. She threw a fit, and she wouldn't eat. They may have inferred that she detected the holy water, and they may have even discussed that possibility in her presence, which she then endorsed, but they don't have recorded any evidence that she detected the holy water prior to those events happening. all they record is evidence showing that Emma threw a fit and refused to eat, which is something that a person with a mental illness, whether factitious disorder imposed on self or something else, might do. And so I don't think we can confidently say anything paranormal happened here.
What about the detection of the relic of the true cross?
Again, we don't have evidence of a demon detecting this relic specifically. Begone Satan states,
"And when the exorcist approached him with the relic of the cross hidden under his cassock, Satan became a raving maniac. 'Begone, begone,' he howled. 'I cannot bear it. Oh, this is torture. It is unbearable.'"
So as far as the recorded evidence concerning this incident goes, Father Reisinger approaches Emma, no doubt, to perform part of an exorcism on her, because why else would he be approaching her? And then Emma yells, "Begone, begone, I can't bear it. Oh, this is torture. It's unbearable." How do we know that this was because he had a relic of the true cross under his cassock? The demonic personality is not recorded as mentioning the relic of the true cross. How do we know that this wasn't just a reference to the alternate personality being tormented by the kinds of things that Father Reisinger had already been doing in the exorcisms? And when it says, "Begone, I can't bear it," it's torture. It means, don't do more exorcism on me, bro. Based on what they recorded, we don't know that that's what the intended meaning was. And so I don't think that we can be confident of anything paranormal happening here.
Then how about the detection of the relic of St. Therese of Lisieux?
This one has more evidential value. As a refresher, here's what Begone Satan says.
"The pastor, Father Steger, had kept a small relic of the little flower of the child Jesus in his sacristy in a small pyx without the knowledge of Father Theophilus. For protection's sake, he placed this in a side pocket of his cassock one day and entered the convent where the exorcism was taking place. Just as the pastor entered the room, the devil began to rave, 'Away, away with that! Away with the relic of the little flower! Away with that weathercock!' 'We have no relic of the little flower,' the exorcist exclaimed. 'Certainly he who just entered has one,' said the devil, indicating the pastor.
So at last we have a direct mention of the thing that the demon is supposed to have preternaturally detected. That's good. That's a sign that something paranormal could be happening here. At the same time, I need to issue two cautions. First, Emma was living in the convent and attended the parish. She had access to the locations and the persons who were there on a regular basis, and she had access to them at times when few other people were around. So she could have learned about the relic in a natural manner. Second, we can't assume that this is a verbatim transcript because we have no evidence that they had a transcriptionist there or a recording device. So Begone Satan's description of this incident may have been phrased in such a way as to make Father Steiger's interpretation of it even clearer. And he could have, misremembered some details after repeatedly rehearsing this event in his mind, which is a known problem with human memory. The more we rehearse stuff, the more we reinforce things. It's thus possible that the alternate personality was not as clear as it's presented in this case. Perhaps the alternate personality didn't mention the relic specifically, at least not in the beginning. Instead, Father Steiger shows up and it throws a tantrum, and the relic he was carrying was later identified as the apparent cause of the tantrum. And then the dialogue was crafted, or after the fact memories were crafted to make that fact clear. I thus can't be sure about this incident. It's quite possible that something paranormal did happen here. It's also possible that it didn't. So I'm going to leave this incident open.
How about when the demons seem to cause and then know about Father Steiger's car accident?
This one also is more interesting. Begone Satan reports that the demons had been threatening Pastor Steiger for a long time. Specifically, they'd been threatening to ruin his reputation in the parish so that he'd have to leave. Then they just said, wait until the end of the week, till Friday. It then happened that on Friday, Father Steiger was making a pastoral visit to one of his parishioners, and when he drove back, this happened.
Suddenly, as he was driving along, a dark black cloud appeared before him. It came just as he was about to pass a bridge over a deep ravine. Great God, it seemed as if his eyes were blindfolded. The next moment there was a crash, a smash-up which dumbfounded him.
So his vision was blocked by a cloud and he crashed. That cloud could have been of paranormal origin, but it also could have been something else. Father Steiger was out in the country in a flat farming area that has frequent winds and seasonal dust. I checked. Particularly, it has dust when it's dry or when farmers have been tilling the ground. There are even dust storms called haboobs that can reduce visibility to zero and cause severe driving hazards. These are more common in the Southwest, but they have been known to occur near Erling. There are also other possible causes for dark clouds on roads, so this could have been paranormal in origin, but it also could have been something else. In any event, Father Steiger was shaken, and he was taken to a doctor.
The doctor discovered some external scars and a state of nervous excitement, but there was no sign of any internal injury.
Obviously, scar tissue doesn't form that quickly, so I assume what they mean here is that he had some external abrasions or scratches, and the doctor then may have bandaged those. Then, when Father Steiger arrives at the convent,
he had hardly entered the room when he was greeted with a roaring laughter full of vengeance and bitter spleen. Ha ha ha, as if the devil were about to burst into a fit of malicious joy at besting him. Today he pulled in his proud neck and was outpointed. I certainly showed him up today. What about your new auto, that dandy car which was smashed to smithereens? It serves you right.
So here we have a report of the demons mentioning the car wreck before it was discussed in Father Steiger's presence. Again, that's good. It could indicate that something paranormal happened here. But we also need to consider whether there is another way of looking at this. So let's start with the threats the demons had been making against Father Steiger. They had not been threatening to wreck his car. They had been threatening to wreck his reputation in the parish. And maybe Emma had even heard rumblings of dissatisfaction among some parishioners, because people are people, and there's hardly a church anywhere that doesn't have someone who's dissatisfied. People are naturally ornery due to the fall. So maybe after threatening to ruin Father Steiger's reputation and repeatedly threatening to do that, the conscious or subconscious plan was to wait until Friday and then announce, ha, your days in the parish are growing short. There's stuff happening among the congregants that you don't even know about. Your reputation is coming apart. Only when Father Steiger shows up on Friday, he has visible abrasions and scratches on his body or bandages covering them. And it's even possible he's wearing a neck brace to help him avoid or recover from the effects of whiplash. So the planned gloating session gets swiftly readjusted. And if there's any mention of his car that isn't recorded, such as from someone saying, Father Steiger is going to be late today because he's seeing a doctor after having an auto crash, which is exactly the kind of news that would race around a country parish, then this gets written down as the demons seemingly causing the crash and having preternatural knowledge of it. So I don't think that we have a proven case here of something paranormal happening, but there's enough here that I'm going to leave this incident open too.
How about the fact that Emma reportedly didn't move her mouth, but people could still hear the demons speaking through her?
I'm afraid that this one isn't very impressive. First, we know that her mouth was not closed the whole time. As we'll cover next, she is known to have vomited copiously, and her mouth was obviously open for that. Also, she's reported to have made multiple kinds of yells, barks, and so forth, and she probably had her mouth open for those too. Based on the way this is recorded, my sense is that there were likely some occasions where they heard her voice but didn't see her lips moving. But so what? That's a skill possessed by ventriloquists all over the world. And maybe, especially if she was tired and in a less animated state, she just didn't move her mouth enough for people to notice it. I thus don't think that we can confidently say that anything paranormal happened here, especially if she had factitious disorder imposed on self. She could have been faking this with ventriloquism.
What about the copious vomiting?
Well, there are multiple conditions that cause vomiting. Some of them are psychological in nature. When a mental illness is the cause of unusual vomiting, it's referred to as psychogenic vomiting. Extreme cases of psychogenic vomiting have sudden, unpredictable onsets, including without prior nausea or retching, and the spells can be so frequent that they lead to disability and prolonged absences from work or school. There's also what's known as cyclical vomiting syndrome. A cyclical vomiting syndrome can be psychogenic in origin, and in extreme cases, a person can be vomiting every 5 to 10 minutes, which is even more frequent than Emma is reported to have vomited. In terms of the volume that Emma is said to have ejected, Father Steiger found it notable that, as far as he was aware, Emma had eaten almost nothing. But the key words are, as far as he was aware. We're not told what Emma's circumstances were when she was not being exorcised, so it's possible that she ate more than he was aware. It's also possible that these vomiting attacks produced more substance after she'd recently eaten. But setting that aside, food is not the only thing that people vomit. They also vomit bile, saliva, stomach mucus, and pancreatic juices. Basically, fluids that the digestive tract tries to keep on hand for digesting food. And these take up more volume than you might think. At any given time, we have more than 2.5 gallons or 10 liters of fluid in our digestive tract. And a person with cyclical vomiting syndrome may eject up to a gallon or 4 liters of it or even more per day. So, you know those 2-liter bottles of Coke you see in the supermarket? 2 of those a day, which is quite a bit of vomit. One incident that I find interesting is when Begone Satan says that Emma vomited something
having the appearance of sliced and chewed tobacco leaves.
What that sounds like is known as coffee ground emesis or coffee ground vomitus. It's named after that because it looks like coffee grounds. It's dark brown or black and has a lumpy texture. What it actually is old and coagulated blood from your intestinal tract, so it's a sign of internal bleeding. I thus take this as evidence that, likely due to a psychogenic case of cyclical vomiting syndrome, Emma had vomited so forcefully and so often that she caused a tear in her intestinal tract, leading to internal bleeding and coffee grounds vomitus. I thus don't believe that we can be confident that anything paranormal is happening here, and certainly not any paranormal production of matter out of nothing, and as the church even holds that demons don't have the power to create matter out of nothing anyway.
Then what about the reports of Emma possibly levitating?
These are the most interesting to me, so I've saved them for last. There are 2 reported instances of possible levitation, one right at the beginning of the exorcisms and one right at the end. We'll look at the second one first. According to Begone Satan,
it was on the 23rd day of December, 1928. In the evening about 9 o'clock that, with a sudden jerk of lightning speed, the possessed woman broke from the grip of her protectors and stood erect before them. Only her heels were touching the bed. At first sight, it appeared as if she were to be hurled up to the ceiling.
Now, if you read that carefully, it's not actually reporting levitation. It says that at first sight, it appeared as if she were to be hurled up to the ceiling. But that's an impression. It's not something that literally happened because she was not hurled up to the ceiling. What the text says is that she broke from the grip of her protectors and stood erect before them with only her heels touching the bed. Okay, so she got loose, she stood up quickly and stood on her heels. And that's not levitation. And so we can't be confident that anything paranormal happened in this incident.
What about the possible levitation at the beginning of the exorcisms?
This one is the most interesting of all. Begone Satan says,
with lightning speed, the possessed dislodged herself from her bed and from the hands of her guards, and her body, carried through the air, landed high above the door of the room and clung to the wall with a tenacious grip. Real force had to be applied to her feet to bring her down from her high position on the wall. The mystery was that she could cling to the wall at all.
This would have been very dramatic to see, and it could indeed have involved a genuine levitation. Unfortunately, we don't have a video recording of it or more detailed eyewitness descriptions, so we can only go by the description we have here. The part of this that is most suggestive of levitation is where it says her body was carried through the air. That would be verified as levitation if the body, unsupported by anything, was carried through the air slowly. But if it happened quick, it could just be Emma jumped from the bed. After all, beds had springs in 1928. The inner spring mattress was invented in 1871 and was being mass-produced by the early 20th century. So this part of the experience may not have been paranormal. Then there's the fact that she clung to the wall with a tenacious grip. That means she was using her hands to hold tight. I thought about the possibility that she could have been pushing on the wall with her hands and legs to try to stay up there, like in a corner or something. But that's not what's happening in the text. She's clinging with a tenacious grip. So there was something up there for her to grip with her hands. More on that in a minute. And her feet were apparently free because force had to be applied to her feet to bring her down. Now, notice where she landed, above the door of the room. Aha! That provides a clue about what she may have been clinging to. In the first place, many doors have molding around them, and in vintage trim, the molding was often much thicker and taller than in modern trim. For example, in Victorian molding, can easily be something you could grab onto. However, even more importantly, older doors frequently had transoms. A transom is a window above a door that lets in light, which was important in the days before electrification and electric lights. And a building constructed in the 1800s in a rural farm community like a convent would likely have transoms. Most of the time, you could also open the transom that, allowed airflow into the room, which was important for temperature control before the days of heating and air conditioning. And in the 19th and early 20th century, some transoms for interior doors were simply open holes. They didn't have a glass or wood panel there that could even be closed. So if this door in the cell where the exorcisms were taking place had a transom, and especially if it were open or had no barrier, that could be what Emma was clinging to with a tenacious grip, either the molding or some element of the transom or the hole or both. In any event, she was tenaciously gripping something to stay up there. That's what the text says. So I don't see proof that anything paranormal was happening here. Though still, there's enough here to, because that initial, was it a leap or was it a levitation, that I won't rule this one out entirely, and I'll keep it open.
Then where does that leave us in terms of whether we have evidence for anything paranormal in this case?
Well, based on the evidence from the sources I have, I'd say it's ambiguous. We got a bunch of cases where I don't think we can have confidence that anything paranormal happened because there are plausible natural explanations. And we've got a few maybes that could be normal or paranormal in nature. So I'm not going to make a final judgment on this question. It could be that this was a case of mental illness that was misdiagnosed as demonic possession, or it could be that there were actually demons involved.
Then let's look at the case from the faith perspective. Before we look at specific theories, what do you make of the case overall?
Well, there are a number of sources for concern. One of them is what I dub famous possessing entities, or FPEs. In modern reincarnation research, there are what are called famous past lives, or FPLs, like when people claim to have been Napoleon or Cleopatra or some other famous person in a past life. While reincarnation researchers do not automatically dismiss FPLs, they are extra careful about them because it is just implausible that so many people would report famous past lives when the vast majority of people in world history were not famous. Now, I don't believe in reincarnation, but I've noticed a parallel in exorcism cases where a bunch of the time energumens report being possessed by very famous entities, like Emma reporting being possessed by Beelzebub, who was oddly different than Satan or Lucifer, and also being possessed by Judas Iscariot. It seems that big names like this are unlikely to show up in the numbers they do, so I'm automatically concerned when I have reports of famous possessing entities.
Does that mean that you don't believe these cases involve demons?
No, not automatically. It's certainly possible that some of them are due to imagination or mental illness, but it's also possible that there are demons involved and they're just lying about who they are. After all, demons are lying liars who work for the father of lies. So I don't trust anything they say. You might have a lower down demon whose name you wouldn't know, but it's pretending to be Satan or Asmodeus in order to intimidate you. It's also hypothetically possible that a spirit could possess more than one person simultaneously, like Judas was reported to do in this case, simultaneously both possessing Emma in 1928 and the Antichrist as he was growing up at the same time. That would increase the frequency with which you might encounter FPEs, but this is not a pattern we see in the Bible. If you look at the cases of possession there, they may involve many demons, but none of the demons are famous. So I find famous possessing entities suspicious. It doesn't mean the person didn't possess. That's a separate question. But it does mean that if the possession is real, then I'm skeptical that the entity is who it claims to be.
What about the entity that claimed to be Judas in this case, or Emma's father Jake and his mistress Mina? Can damned human spirits really possess someone?
This is a subject of debate in the exorcistic community. Some exorcists think that this is impossible, but other exorcists, like Father Reisinger, think it is possible. Exorcists certainly do encounter entities claiming to be damned humans, and they could be demons who are lying, but they could also be telling the truth. Personally, I'm open on this question. Aquinas held that the souls of the damned can, by God's permission, interact with the living. And we know that God allows demons to interact with us, so I don't see why God couldn't do the same thing for damned humans. Hell is not a physical place, but a spiritual state, so it's not like they would get out of hell and stop suffering if they interacted with the living. Also, our spirits control our bodies when we're alive, so I don't see why a damned soul couldn't try to impose itself on a living person the way a demon does and try to possess him. I suspect a human spirit shouldn't be as strong as an angelic spirit, so it might be easier to get a human spirit out than a fallen angel, but I don't see why it should be impossible for a human possession to take place. On the other hand, I can't trust such spirits when they say they're human, and I'm particularly suspicious of the entity claiming to be Judas Iscariot, since he would be a famous possessing entity. I'd be less suspicious of Jake and Mina, Emma's father and his mistress, so I'm open on this question, but I don't come down on one side or the other.
Are there other things that concern you about this case?
There are small things that I could nitpick, like Father Reisinger didn't always follow proper procedure in these exorcisms. I also think his interpretation of the Book of Revelation has serious problems with it, and strangely, for someone who was given a mission by our Lord Jesus Christ himself to warn the world about the imminent coming of Antichrist, Father Reisinger doesn't seem to have made any real efforts on that front. But these are lesser matters.
Then what about the overall theory of this case you think is likely true? If demons were involved, do you think Father Reisinger's theory that in addition to demons, there were heavenly visitors is true? Or do you think it was all demons and the heavenly visitors were just lying?
Well, this was a case of exorcism, but it also involved reports of heavenly apparitions, so the criteria that the Church uses to evaluate such matters are relevant. We discussed those criteria in episodes 321 and 322, so you can check those out for full treatment. I won't go through them all here, but I do want to call attention to one point, which is that the Church acknowledges that material contained in private revelations is not expected to be perfect and accurate in every detail. So I wouldn't hold the heavenly visitors that Emma claimed to converse with to a standard of spotless perfection. But especially when you read the Secret Manuscript, we are way, way beyond spotless perfection. This is not a case of genuinely heavenly revelations with a small amount of error mixed in. This is a set of ostensibly heavenly revelations that are chock full of error from beginning to end. The Antichrist did not reign from 1952 to 1955, and the time frame was already set because the Antichrist was already born and already possessed by Judas. Otto von Habsburg was not the Great Monarch. In fact, he was never a king at all. The 3 days of darkness did not happen. Jesus and his cross did not appear in the sky. There was not a massive wave of conversions. The Christian world was not put back together. There was not a physical resurrection of the martyrs. There are all kinds of problems with the interpretations Father Reisinger proposed. There are tensions between his proposals and Catholic doctrine, and I could go on. So, not to belabor the point, I can't credit these alleged heavenly revelations as being genuine. If they did have a paranormal cause rather than just being due to mental illness, then I'd have to say that they were demonic deceptions.
Are there any general lessons you think we can learn from this?
Yes, I've often said that you should never believe anything demons tell you, and we'll discuss that more in future episodes. But if you're looking at an exorcism case and spirits claiming to be from heaven start showing up and giving messages, then you need to be very careful about them. I mean, if you already got demons here and now heavenly guys are showing up, you really want to be careful because, as St. Paul states in 2 Corinthians 11:14,
even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light.
And as John tells us,
beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God.
That very clearly was not done, or at least not done adequately in this case, resulting in Father Reisinger being caught in a web of deception. And who knows how many people who read Begone Satan also being deceived, although to a lesser degree.
Is there anything else you'd like to say before we go?
I'd just like to say thanks once again to Joseph Laycock for helping me get the Secret Manuscript, and be sure to check out his books that we'll have links to.
And so, Jimmy, what's your bottom line?
Something went desperately wrong in the Ecklund exorcisms and the ones that preceded and followed them. There is a good case to be made that there was nothing preternatural in this situation, and it was all due to mental illness. On the other hand, demons may have been involved, but if so, not only were the demons lying about the Antichrist, the revelations from the supposed heavenly visitors would be completely inaccurate. Proper testing of them and their message was not done, and we cannot have confidence in any statements purported to be from a preternatural source in this case because of what went desperately wrong in these exorcisms. It teaches us two lessons. First, that we should make very, very certain that an ostensible case of possession isn't just due to mental illness. And second, that we should never believe anything demons say because demons are lying liars who work for the father of lies.
And what further resources can we offer to the audience, Jimmy?
We'll have a link to Begone Satan, also a link to the social science study of exorcism in Christianity, Joseph Laycock's book, The Penguin Book of Exorcisms, and his book, The Exorcist Effect. We'll also have a link to an interview with Father Vincent Lampert that contains some data we used last week. Also, the article that I wrote on the 3 Days of Darkness, and information about Otto von Habsburg.
Look out, here
Now we turn to our mysterious feedback, brought to us by our feedback coordinator, Rob Leonardi. And this feedback, as I said, comes from episode number 402, Hitler's Marriage and More Weird Questions. The first one comes from Eamon, who wrote on X, "Oddly, Hitler was almost excommunicated. It never made it to Pius XI's desk over his assistance at Himmler's invalid marriage. The Holy Office decided to table it and play it quietly. Mysterious indeed."
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. I'd love to learn more about it. If you have a link or a resource you could recommend, let me know.
STSTB5V on YouTube writes, "As far as I know, in the Middle Ages there used to be secret marriages, aka marriage between a bride and a bridegroom without any witnesses. The church was, especially as time and understanding progressed, against it, because marriage is a public thing and therefore the marital status of people shouldn't be a secret. That kind of secret marriage was called in German Winkellehe. Hopefully, I'm not sure that's the right pronunciation, but Jim, you can correct me. Because the spouses give one another their matrimonial consent in the corner, i.e. in private and without witnesses. The Winkellehe was especially cracked down on after the Fourth Lateran Council."
Yeah, it's not that marriage intrinsically requires a public ceremony. It does require public acknowledgement, but you could, if church law didn't prevent it, get married without a ceremony or in private. And that used to happen in Christian Europe. And the church eventually cracked down on it and made private marriages illegal because of all the problems it created. There's a moment in the Steve Martin movie Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, which is a film constructed largely out of black and white film noir detective movies that have been edited together with some additional footage of Steve Martin and a couple of other actors to form a story. In it, Steve Martin plays Detective Rigby Reardon, and he's got like Philip Marlowe, played by Humphrey Bogart, as his partner. Humphrey Bogart appearing via footage. But there's a moment where Steve Martin he's in the process of winning the girl, and they're alone together in a hotel room, and he's kissing her, and they're kissing each other passionately. And we hear Rigby Reardon's voice narration of the situation. It's like, I was kissing her with every lip on my face. My plan was to maneuver her over to the bed, marry her, and then start the whoopee machine. And the thing is, you could do that. At one point in church history, you could be kissing a girl, maneuver her over to the bed, marry her on the spot, and then start the whoopee machine. And so that actually used to be possible. But then people having disputes about, well, I didn't think we were really married last night, and you're not getting into my family's inheritance money and stuff like that. Some people had to ruin it for everybody.
And then the next one comes from Pyra Draculea on YouTube, who writes, "An additional thought about the law of attraction thing. In the modern era, the algorithms tend to pick up on what you're interested in and serve you up content that gives you new tools. For example, tutorials, ads for workshops, or opportunities. For example, I have a comic project about a punk rock rat dude, and it didn't take long after I started posting about it to my friends that social media started suggesting groups about rats and rat behavior and rat art. And as I posted about painting more, I started getting suggestions about makers markets and conventions and galleries, etc. If you wanted to become a famous painter in the analog days, most people would do things like start taking classes or go to gallery openings. Then you're going to be in the right places to meet the right people and find out about the right opportunities. I've also heard of studies saying that your perception follows what's on your mind. So if you're interested in something, you'll notice things related to that something, which is the same effect of exposing you to opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise have seen."
Yep. Those are all things that happen. Thank you very much for writing in.
And then John Henry sent this email. "One question Jimmy addressed concerned marriage between two individuals stranded on a deserted island, with or without other castaways. How would these two marry without a priest to preside over the wedding or mass? Would the man and woman simply say, 'I do,' and boom, they're married? I can't quite grasp how this works without a priest or layperson to say, 'Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today,' and preside over the wedding."
Well, in this situation, you are excused from observing the Catholic form of marriage, and so there's no particular ceremony that has to be done. You do need witnesses, so this is not the same as a private marriage. But if there are other people there, even if there's no priest or deacon, then you can use whatever vows you want, or even no vows. You could just say to the witnesses, hey, just so y'all know, we're married now. And that would be sufficient. You also could do it up a little more. You could have a moment where in front of the witnesses you say, I take you to be my wife and I take you to be my husband. So, but really it's all open because you're dispensed from observing the Catholic form of marriage, or you're exempt from observing the Catholic form of marriage.
Right, and that's all our feedback for this time. Now it's time to hear from you. What are your theories about what we've revealed about the Ecklund Exorcism case and all its startling claims? You can let us know by visiting sqpn.com or the Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World Facebook page, sending us an email to feedback@mysterious.fm, sending a tweet to @mys_world, visiting the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord, or calling our mysterious feedback line at 619-738-4515. That's 619-738-4515.
And thanks to Oasis Studio 7 for the video and animation work in this episode. Check it out by going to youtube.com/Jimmy Akin. While you're there, do all the YouTube things. Like, comment, subscribe, write reviews, hype, share, whatever you can do to help promote the show to your friends and even to your enemies, because they need to be educated too. Be sure when you subscribe that you sprinkle holy water and hold up a crucifix to the bell notification to compel it to notify you whenever I have a new video.
I also want to thank Rob Mady for his voiceover work on this episode. So Jimmy, what's our next episode going to be about?
Next week, we're going to look at a different kind of spirit than we looked at this week. We're going to be going back to the earliest centuries of the church, starting with the first, and talk about ancient Christian encounters with ghosts. There's some really interesting stuff to hear, so get ready for some ghost stories from the first Christians.
Folks, be sure to follow Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or at Jimmy's YouTube channel, where you should hit the bell to get those notifications. You can find links to Jimmy's resources from our discussion on our show notes at mysterious.fm/413. And remember, to help us continue to produce the podcast, please visit givemysterious.fm. Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World is also brought to you in part by Rosary Army, featuring award-winning Catholic podcasts, rosary resources, videos, and the School of Mary online community, prayer, and learning platform. Learn how to make them, pray them, and give them away while growing in your faith at rosaryarmy.com and schoolofmary.com. Until next time, Jimmy Akin, thank you for exploring with us our mysterious world.
Thanks, Tom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World on StarQuest.